Okay, hi. I'm going to go over the requirements for the HL essay, or as we've been calling it, the Lit essay. This is a very important IB assessment, and everyone in this class is going to do it regardless of whether or not you are testing for the IB, because it's also going in as a class grade. So here's an overview of the assessment. It's 1,200 to 1,500 words, so that's 1,200 to 1,500 words. There's a hard cutoff at 1,500. What you're writing is a broad literary examination of one text or work that we studied in class, and it has to be centered around a clear thesis and a focused analytical argument. You also obviously will need to incorporate ample evidence from the text. You are strongly encouraged to expand on one of the papers that you've previously written. That might be an essay that you've written. If you pulled something from last year, it might be like a practice outline that you worked on. It could be a response from one of the tests that we've had. I should essentially be able to trace your ideas through your notebook or through prior work that you've turned in through Schoology. If you decide not to build on one of the papers that you've already written, I still should be able to trace those ideas through your notebook or prior work. You are also encouraged, but not required, to explore one of the 7 concepts that we've talked about in class this year. So that's identity, identity, culture, communication, creativity, perspective, representation, and transformation. They describe the essay as a broad literary investigation. It's not a catalog of literary techniques. So you're exploring a central concept, whatever that might be, looking at how it's expressed in the text or the work, and then how that connects to audience purpose and context. You also need to make sure you use proper citations and have your bibliography at the end. When the prompt says that you're looking at one text or work, that means either a singular text, like Pride and Prejudice, or a work as it's defined by the IB, which is several short pieces of the same genre from the same author. So you could look at the Zadie Smith essays as a whole work. You could look at the Tom Gunn poems or a selection of those poems as a work. Or likewise, you could look at any of the essays or the poems that you looked at last year. You can use several short pieces from the same work, so from the same author in the same genre, but you cannot mix and match authors. So you couldn't compare nope, that's not one of the ones we did. You couldn't compare Pride and Prejudice with James Baldwin. That would be a weird pairing anyway, but this is not compare contrast. You cannot talk about more than one work. You also cannot choose either of the works that you talked about in your oral exam last year. So think back to the oral that you did with your 11th grade teacher. You cannot use either of those works because you've already been assessed on those works. So if you don't remember what you did for your oral last year, then just choose a text from this year to make sure that you're in the clear. That rhymed. Okay, it's requiring you to do a focused analytical argument from a broad literary perspective. That's from the instructions IB Lit guide. So thinking more about what that means, again, you're exploring a central concept, not cataloging techniques. So you're obviously going to talk about techniques, but you're not just listing things. You're going to think about them in light of the greater significance and not just the isolated instances of them in the text. So here are some sample titles that convey a focused analytical argument taken from a broad literary perspective. So thinking about how the trauma that Maya Angelou undergoes and how she writes about that in 908 Caged Bird Sings and how that transforms her, you would probably write about technique, right? You'd write about perspective, you might write about diction, you might write about the metaphor of the caged bird, but you're not simply cataloging those techniques, you're talking about how those lead to the transformation of the character. And you can take a look at the other examples. Here are a couple of notes about formatting. With titles and authors, titles of long texts like books and plays are italicized, and titles of short texts like essays and poems are put in quotation marks. So you can take a look at those examples. Please make sure if you write about the poem The Man with Night Sweats that you put it in quotation marks because it's also the title of the work as a whole, or the book as a whole. Please don't abbreviate titles even if you've been doing that in your notebook. It's not acceptable for the formality of this assignment. And then make sure you spell the author's name correctly. A lot of people were misspelling Jane Austen's last name, and they were writing it Austin, as in the city in Texas, but it's Austen, as in she lives in England, so E-N. The first time that you refer to the author, you should use the author's full name, even if they're really famous. And then after that, you should use the author's last name only. There's no circumstances where it's appropriate to refer to the author by first name. Now, I just said no circumstances, but the one exception to that rule is if you are writing about a memoir, you can talk about the author when you would talk about the author by their last name, but you could refer to the character as the first name of the person, just to show a distinction between the author and then their portrayal of themselves. So if you're writing about Persepolis, then you could call her Satrapi for the author and use Marjan for the character. Okay, citations. Please make sure to use, first of all, it needs to be consistent, but second, I would recommend parenthetical and in-text citations. Generally speaking, we use MLA for the study of literature and the language arts. Because you're writing about one book, probably, asterisk there, all you need to do is include the page number in the citation. However, if you are doing like the Baldwin essays, those came from different publications, and so you would need to have all of those cited differently, in which case you're probably going to be referring to them by the title and the page number. You can look up how to do that online. Like Purdue OWL will tell you how to do a bibliography. Believe it or not, I do not have everything memorized about how to do a bibliography, and I would have to look it up online too. Make sure that you put the entire bibliographic citation at the end of the paper, and only at the end of the paper, not at the beginning of the paper, not in the intro. Obviously, you're going to refer to the title and author and maybe, if relevant, the year of publication, but only put the whole bibliography citation at the end of the paper. If you reference the title or the poem or the page number in the sentence, then you don't need to include the page number or the title in the parentheses. So here are two examples of the same quote, and you can see how that's done. One more word on citations. Sometimes people save those until the end, but then it's an enormous hassle to remember the page number of where you found all of your quotes. So treat the page number like part of the quotation, and anytime you put the quotation anywhere in your notes or in your paper, put the page number along with it in parentheses so you have it ready to go. Okay, here is the timeline. So February 1st, that's tomorrow, the proposal and the plan are due. Wednesday, February 9th through Wednesday, February 15th, the outlines are due. It says at 11:59, but your conference will actually be taking place during class and not at midnight. So you'll be turning in an outline the night before your conference. You will get to choose your conference dates. So starting the evening of February 8th through February 14th, I think, you will be submitting your outline, and then we will have a conference in class, and you'll be signing up for your conference time. A few of you might be signing up during lunch, depending on how many we have. On Friday, February 18th, the full rough draft is due. So that is before you leave for break, your rough draft will be due. Friday, March 4th, the final is being turned into to turnitin.com through Schoology. And on Monday, March 7th, you're submitting them to the IB. So a couple things I want to point out about the timeline. The full detailed outline, which I'll go over more in a minute in terms of the requirements, that is your chance to get feedback from me. You are signing up for that conference time. You are responsible for making sure that your paper is turned in and that you are there. The conference points cannot be made up later. So if you don't have your outline ready to go for your conference, then you lose the opportunity to get those conference points. When you turn in your rough draft on February 18th, where everybody is going to take a 10-day break from school. And so you're not expected to work on your draft over winter break, and I'm not going to be giving you formal feedback on your rough drafts. This is an externally assessed assignment, which means that somebody at the IB is giving you the final grade on it. I will be giving you ample feedback on your outline, but I will not be reading through and giving you feedback on your rough drafts. When we return from break on the 28th, I think, we'll be doing peer editing of those, and that is when you'll have a chance to get a lot of peer feedback and also do some self-reflection, and we'll take a look at the rubric as well. When you turn in the final, you'll be turning it in through turnitin.com, and then we will all be submitting on the 7th. More details to follow. I just said we were all turning them in on the 7th, but if you're not testing for the IB, then you still are just completing the steps of the assignment for this class, and then your peers who are submitting are turning theirs in, and you're not turning it into anyone except me. Everyone is getting a class grade for the stages of this assignment: the proposal, the outline, the rough draft, and the final. And this is a time-sensitive assignment because we're turning them into the IB as about the latest date we possibly can. So the due dates are real for this. You cannot push it until the end of the quarter. Once you've written the outline, you are locked into the text and to the topic. So it's not just a sort of shifty thinking. It's like you're committing to writing that essay. Okay, the first step is the brainstorm sheet, and there's more information on Schoology that I'll go over live and in person. This is due tomorrow. And then the last thing on this is for the detailed outline. The answer is really detailed. Okay, so this is and just the first couple of pages of a very detailed outline. I want to point out that it's written in sentences. I also want to point out that this is just the first and the intro and the first body paragraph. And this is an old outline for a comparative essay, but you are not comparing two texts. You are just writing about one. Okay, so that is an overview of this assignment. I hope that this has answered some questions and helped you get a sense of what to do for this assessment. I will now, in live and in person, field real questions about it, and we will get started. Here we go.